everyone. My name is Ashleigh from Trees to the Future, and we're here working with Timberland on some tree planting projects across Africa. To kick things off for this conversation, my friend Eric and I were asked to say a few words about our work and what we do at our organizations. So I can get started. Trees for the Future was founded in 1989 as a way to combat unsustainable land use practices in the developing world. Historically, we worked all over the world, but now we concentrate on 6 countries in sub-Saharan Africa. And we work a lot on something called agroforestry, which is the combination of crops and trees on a farmland to help produce food and help to better the environment through tree planting. We work currently with Timberland in the Fatick region of Senegal, which is a country in West Africa located on the coast, the westernmost coast of Africa. And we work with them to help plant trees with smallholder farmers in this region. It's a really, really cool project, and I'm really excited to dig in and tell you guys about it. How are things going for you, Eric? Tell me about how your projects are going, how it is working from home.
Sure, yeah, things are going well. It's been interesting times for sure, but the work we do is as urgent as ever, so it's been fun to keep on those projects and keep the movement going. So excited to see you again, and excited to talk a little bit more about American Forests and the work we do. Maybe I'll just jump in a little bit and just tell you more about my organization.
Yeah.
We're a national forest conservation group, the oldest in the United States, founded in 1875, so been around for a long time and thinking through innovations and new techniques for a while now. Our mission is to create healthy and resilient forests from cities to wilderness. We work in large landscapes, so the Rockies, Sierra Nevadas, but also in some of our cities like Boston and Columbus, Ohio. And in each one of those places, building partnerships, developing new science, and thinking how we can scale those up through policy initiatives to create healthy forests and maximize their benefits for people.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love that our organizations are doing these two similar kinds of work, but in different places. I think it's, like you said, just equally important and equally interesting to have, we're focusing on these two different things, but it's really helpful.
Yeah, excited to hear more about your work.
That's true. One of the things that we wanted to talk about in this conversation was the impact of tree planting on environment and people. So Eric, do you want to talk a little bit about your work and how you see trees fitting into the environment and people side of your work?
Yeah, you bet. Trees, of course, and forests do lots of things for society. We could spend the rest of the talk just listing those, but I think the two that we're most focused on now, and mostly because there's a real urgency around these issues, is climate change, number one, and then health and well-being in our urban areas, also very urgently needed at this point, particularly in light of COVID-19 and other issues going on. Sustaining our healthy environment is really important. But first on climate change, trees are already doing great service for us here in the United States. They sequester 15% of our annual CO2 emissions from burning fossil fuels. And we think we can double that through projects like planting trees in partnership with great companies like Timberland and others to move this forward. And also taking care of our existing forests and making sure they're healthy and adapting to climate change as we move on. So a lot of potential for that. Some interesting facts: a tree can store up to 1 metric ton of CO2 over its lifetime. So a great service to continue, and that equates to thousands of miles traveled each year. So you can think about each time you plant a tree, you're pulling cars off the road, you're sequestering carbon, and at a great benefits. We also see a real moral imperative around in our cities and urban areas where, if you look at a map of tree canopy cover in cities across the United States, you're also likely looking at a map of income. And so where we have the least amount of tree cover, we have some of the most vulnerable populations. And so we see it really important for us to figure out where those inequities exist and to build partnerships in those places to expand tree cover so that they can create healthy environments. They can scrub air pollution. They can even benefit our stress levels and well-being, especially at a time like now where we all want to be outside. Trees can lower our stress levels and just bring us back to ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. I hear that. It's been really lovely to look out my window every day and see all of these beautiful trees. Not only because I work for the trees, but also because I really just love their beauty and they make me feel better when I'm feeling down. So I agree with you. From our side, we work a lot with the vulnerable populations, like you mentioned as well, but just in a different context. We work, like I mentioned, across sub-Saharan Africa. So Trees for the Future, trees.org, works in Senegal, Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, and Cameroon. And we work, like I mentioned, on something called agroforestry, which is a specific way of planting trees integrated with crops so that smallholder farmers, or really anyone who has enough land space, can provide a sustainable income for their families. They can provide health and well-being benefits to their families, kind of like you're mentioning, not just the mental side of things, but they're able to have income to provide medicine and schooling and food, these kinds of things. And the populations that we work with across Africa, we're not just planting trees, we are literally changing lives. Farm by farm, we take farmers through a training approach that takes 4 years. We call it the forest garden approach. And in those 4 years, farmers are taught everything you need to know about how to grow trees and how to reforest their barren lands. So to give a little bit of a picture of the kind of landscapes that we're talking about, they essentially look like the moon. I mean, the landscapes in Senegal in particular, where our partnered with Timberland, our projects are partnered with Timberland, they look like a sandbox. There's almost no tree cover, maybe 1 or 2 old trees that were too big for people to cut down. And so we help farmers go from almost no trees, 1 or 2 trees on their farms, to over 2,000 trees in 4 years. So it's a really dense planting. And like you were talking about, it has all these additional benefits as well, related to making sure that water stays in the farm, making sure that the ecosystems remain intact, that we attract biodiversity with agroforestry as well. So things like birds, bees, and butterflies come back to the landscape after who knows how long being gone. And this approach really helps us see the benefit and the evolution of this tree planting. It's something that is really powerful and really great to see from a landscape perspective, but it also really helps us see how trees impact people's lives in a direct way. So, like I mentioned, income and things like that, but our farmers go on average, we do surveys at the beginning of our work with them, and they go on from having several days of hunger a week to having 80% to 90% to 100% food security over the course of the 4-year program. And they also sequester, like you mentioned, lots and lots of carbon, which is great for not only the landscape, but also for things like offsetting travel and other types of environmental detriments that happen off farm as well. So it's really cool to see how our work kind of aligns in that way. I really like that.
Yeah, I really like how your approach integrates people and forest together. It's not one or the other. And you and I could probably geek out on all the tree species we find and other animals, but unless we're building solutions that benefit people too, we're gonna have a real hard time sustaining those forests over time. So really cool approach that you're taking.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's really important to integrate the people side with the planet side, and then also with companies, and other partners. We have, other actors getting involved, which is really exciting. Everyone is building momentum towards these kinds of solutions. It's really cool.
Mm-hmm. Well, great. Maybe actually I'll take the next question here. So we deal with a lot of challenges here in the United States when we're thinking about reforestation projects and how to implement them in a way that will maximize those benefits. What are some of those challenges and opportunities you see in your work?
Yeah, thanks for asking. That's a really important question. So I think a lot of people think, as soon as you plant a tree, that's it, right? The tree goes ground, it lives forever, there's no problems. But of course, that's not the reality. So one of the things that's unique to our approach, like I mentioned earlier, is that we accompany farmers through this 4-year training process. We help farmers take care of their trees and understand the ecology of trees, from planting the seed at a nursery to taking it to the field and then having it grow and monitor it. One of the things that we see as a challenge for sure is climate change. Like you mentioned earlier, it's a big problem. The farmers that we work with are on the front lines against climate change. They're not only the most vulnerable people against climate change because they have very low incomes and they work in these extreme environments, but also because as rainfall patterns are changing, floods, droughts. Sometimes, normally planting happens in July, but sometimes now it's happening in August. And these are farmers who have been working these lands for, generations and generations. And so to see the frontline impacts of climate change is a real threat to everyone, but especially to the farmers that we face, or the farmers that we work with. So we're trying to help farmers, accompany them through this process, but also being mindful of the challenges, that we essentially, until we plant more trees, have no control over. Yeah. What about you? How do you
so, yeah, very similarly, no matter where we work, you're right, we talked about the benefits of forests for climate change. They can pull carbon out of the air. Those negative emissions are really important to meeting our carbon goals. But climate change are influencing the ability of trees to do that, to provide that service for us. So we found it important that wherever we work to think through how can we integrate climate science into the projects we're doing. What should we plant? What species are better adapted to future conditions? Or how should we plant them? Should we keep planting the way we always have? Or should we think about tree planting in a way that mimics some of the post-disturbances we see, like severe fire and drought? And many others along those lines, how can we integrate that science to make sure that the next forest we're building will be more sustainable and adapt to climate change? So climate change is certainly one of those major threats, and we're actively trying to think, what science do we need? What partnerships do we need? What companies like Timberland who are engaged with this work in places like the Sierra Nevadas can we do this work to move forward?
Yeah, that's definitely something that we see too. So we work a lot with a mix of native species that are really adapted to the climate, and then we also try and build in these things that you're mentioning, like how do we mitigate all of these problems that are happening? So how do we plant species that are flood tolerant and drought tolerant, and can withstand these massive swings in climate variability? So that's really important. Having the science behind that too, I think, is something that really is going to push us and propel us into the future with tree planting.
Yeah, it'd be great to follow up too, just to hear more about the techniques you're using. So in South Texas, along the border with Mexico, we have a drought resilience plan in place where we're thinking about changing species that are more drought tolerant, using tree tubes that may help maintain moisture on that root collar. So I'd be excited to share those with you and hear more about what your techniques are.
Yeah, we can definitely have that conversation. Maybe we can have another conversation for the real tree geeks here who are watching. Yeah, I can talk all day about different tree species, and I'm always fascinated to learn more and more every day about tree species and all the different things they do. And even with climate change, for example, the cashew tree is one of the trees that's expected to do really well in a changing and our climate, which is just fascinating from a science perspective. So yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. So I'll take the next question. In your role at American Forests, what's the project that you've been the most proud of, and what made it so special, and why do you like it so much?
Yeah, this is a really tough question. We've got lots of really cool projects, and I feel guilty not bringing more up, but there are two. I'll cheat a little bit, but I won't dwell on them too long. One in central Michigan. So American Forest, I mentioned, has been around for a very long time, and one of our first corporate sponsored tree planting projects was in Michigan in 1990. It's the start of our global relief program, where we helped plant jack and red pine to help recover habitat for the endangered Kirtland's warbler. It was one of the original species put on the Endangered Species Act back in the late 60s, early 70s. And just last year was delisted from endangered species. Like incredible recovery, from really low populations and real concern about this bird going extinct, to now having a healthy and rebounding population. In large part thanks to tree planting efforts like we with Timberland, and going in and planting the red and jack pine that this bird needs to nest, and to plant those in a way that meets their habitat requirements is really, really important and exciting and gratifying. I'm also a bird watcher, so I'm so excited and totally geeked out when I got a chance to go to Central Michigan, your home state, to see one of these birds singing on our territory. It was a great experience. And then we also work in California, a priority landscape for us. And many of you listening, I'm sure you've heard too, is that California's been devastated by large, severe wildfires. The Camp Fire from 2018 was the deadliest, most destructive forest fire in California's history. almost 100 people lost their lives in that event. So very tragic. And so at this point now, we're thinking about how do we bring this back? What do we do to make sure this forest can come back in a way that's more resilient to fire, but still bring back those important benefits to sequestering carbon and filtering water, providing water for drinking water, et cetera. So we've been working very closely with partners there, including the Bureau of Land Management and the local counties, to think through a reforestation plan that will be more adapted to climate change in the future. And so we're very excited to be in this place where there's such an important role for forests and trees, and to be engaged and working hand in hand with partners on that.
Yeah, definitely. I'd like to hear actually a little bit more about your work in urban areas too. I feel like that's something that doesn't get talked about as much. So maybe you could give me a little bit of insight about how you're working in urban areas.
Yeah, good point. Thanks for asking about that. We talked a bit about the importance of tree canopy cover in urban areas for health reasons, but many other reasons too, including climate change. Trees, of course, sequester carbon in cities too, but they also, depending on where you site them, can help lower energy use in residential commercial buildings. And so being strategic about how we use our urban tree canopy to lower the demand for energy, but also sequester more carbon is a great opportunity for us. So across the country, we have partnership cities like Detroit and Miami, where we're building partnerships with local communities, coming in and asking how we can be helpful, thinking through, do we have the science we need to fully build out the city's tree canopy? And if not, working hand in hand to develop those tree canopy plans. Helping address barriers together. In Columbus, Ohio, we're building a tree nursery to help supply the trees that will be needed to build that out. And then building tools and technology to help communities think this through too. We're a partner on this website called the Vibrant Cities Lab. That'll sort of a how-to on if you're a community member and you want to think through, how do I improve my tree canopy in my neighborhood or my city? This is a wonderful tool that can walk you through those steps.
Yeah, that's really cool. So I'm from just outside of Detroit, so I'm really excited to hear about some of the urban planting stuff that you guys are working on.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear some more about some of the great stories. You talked a bit about some of the work early on, but I'd love to hear more about what you're most proud of.
Yeah, so I served as a Peace Corps volunteer in the Fatigue area where our Timberland project is based. And it's been really fulfilling. I get to go back to Senegal, where I lived for 3 years in a rural community. I live in a hut with no electricity or running water. I feel very connected to these projects because I love Senegal. I speak 2 Senegalese languages. So just from a personal perspective, it's really fun to go back and get to see some farmers that I've been working with for quite a while. But one of the most fulfilling things for me is that feeling that I get, and this is the feeling that comes across in all of the projects, no matter where we work in Africa, the feeling I get when I walk into a forest garden. So I'll try and paint a picture a little to kind of give you the sensation, and hopefully it'll come across. So imagine, like what I said earlier, it's a moonscape. There's no trees, nothing, and then all of a sudden you see this blip of green on the horizon. And you walk in and there's a gate you open, and then there's the trees all around, and it's extremely abundant. And you walk in and the temperature is like 10 degrees cooler. And you look at the soil, maybe a meter outside of the forest garden door, you pick it up and it's just play sand. It like evaporates into the wind with your fingers. And then you walk into the forest garden and you see earthworms and you see birds and all these things that you're mentioning, biodiversity and birds coming back and animals. One of the coolest stories that I like to bring up from Senegal is that we had farmers working a project of ours in southern Senegal. And we built something called a live fence. So instead of having traditional metal fencing, we work with farmers to build this barrier in their fields with thorny species all around. So it protects the field from animals and from other things. And one of our farmers told us this crazy, awesome story of he lives on a river, the Gambia River, and a hippopotamus tried to get into the field. And the live fence was so thick and so strong that the hippopotamus tried to get in 3 times and he couldn't break through.
Impressive.
So we're doing a good job of not only protecting the field from predators or different animals, but also just making sure that the farmers have that sort of mental peace of mind and security with their fields as well, which is really important. So the things that I love about going into a forest garden, like I mentioned, these, this abundant life that you see just sort of springing up is all from farmers' hard work. And so I have just a tremendous amount of respect for the farmers that we work with. They're out on the front lines planting trees and doing all this really hard work for their families and for their communities. And a lot of the farmers that we work with have become not only planters and stewards of their environment, but they've also become sort of forward-thinking farmers, right? They're planting trees not just for their own gain, they have income increases, things like that, but they're planting for the future of their children and for their communities. And so a lot of the farmers that we work with have become true leaders in their communities, and they're really empowered through tree planting, which is super cool to see. And we've had a lot of farmers in our program who have been so excited by the approach that we work with them on, that they choose to plant a second or a third forest garden just on their own, from their own resources and knowledge, and then they're passing it forward to members of their own community. And then they've also, some of them have joined Trees for the Future as staff members because they're so passionate about the approach that they're like, we're grassroots farmers, we're in this space, we're community leaders now, and we want to give back. Mm-hmm. So it's been really cool to see how this sort of ecosystem, pun I suppose intended, of farmers is sort of feeding back into the communities and helping Senegal, for example, meet their nationally determined contributions for the Paris Accords and all these other kinds of things. But it's at a grassroots level. So we're helping families, we're empowering them to make these decisions and go through training. But at the end of the day, it's really the farmers that are making this project happen, which is really cool. And I love visiting farmers. It's my favorite part of my job, for sure.
Fascinating. Thanks.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask a question, especially given everything that's going on. How do you think that individuals can get involved in the tree planting space? I think it's not super easy to imagine how to get involved necessarily, because now all of us, like you're mentioning, in this urban space, have the ability to just get a tree and go out and plant it. So how do you see individuals getting involved in this work?
Yeah, it's a tough question anyway, and then you throw in a global pandemic, it's even more sort of question, how do I get involved in this moment in time, right? A great question. So I think the one way is to learn, right? Visit your website, trees.org and americanforest.org, and just learn about the places we are and the benefits and stories that you've told and detail about the places and partners that we've worked with. That's a great place to begin. Just become knowledgeable about the benefits. Maybe that inspires you to turn around your backyard and do some nature-based gardening. Or maybe inspires you to think about how you can volunteer when it's safe to do so down the line. So that's a great place to start. I would recommend that. In American Forest, I think we're built to help folks like that. If you want to donate to work that you can't be involved in directly, or it's distant from you, trees.org website, I think you can use those tools to help invest in and support the things that are going on across the globe.
Yeah.
How about you? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. Learning is a really important part of our organization. So if you're interested, and maybe this is something that could even complement the work that you're doing at American Forest, and just for the general public, we actually have a really comprehensive training program, and it's free. You can become an agroforester online. The website is training.trees.org, and we help people think through these issues and talk about planting and species and appropriate gardening techniques. And even if you're not in Africa, there's something I think that everyone can learn. I go on every so often myself, even though I feel like I know a lot about trees, just because I'm like, what does go with tomatoes? What plants go well with these other kinds of plants? And so it's an interesting learning experience. So I encourage you to check that out. I think something that you mentioned that's important to hit on is the spreading awareness of the work that we do. So even given the current circumstances of everything going on in the world, it's still important to be mindful, I think, of how the climate and the earth really holds us and underlies all this work that's going on. A healthy earth is a healthy population. And so spreading awareness about our work and work that other organizations do, American Forest and others, trees.org, is really, really key. And because in many cases we all can't be out planting trees, yeah, donating to these kinds of projects and getting involved and feeling proud of the work, I think is something that just anyone can get involved in. Yeah. So.
Yeah, great thoughts. And it made me think of too, Timberland has got a great social media and they're putting out good information too about the importance of these projects. And so, following your organizations that you trust and follow to is also a good idea.
Yeah, and thinking about, both, so I work in the global space, so thinking about the global reach of tree planting and how you can impact people's lives across Africa, but also, in your case, in your own backyard. If you're passionate about the Sierra Nevadas, you can, be directed there. If you're passionate about food security or economic justice, you can also, come to trees.org or other organizations that Timberland is working with. So.
Great. And one thing I'll note too is that American Forest is a partner in the Trillion Trees movement happening across the globe that I imagine you've been hearing about too.
Yeah.
Just this January, 1t.org launched. It's sort of meant to be this global platform to really answer this question specifically: what can we do to help this global movement? So American Forest and the 1t.org and World Economic Forum are building out a U.S. chapter for this, and there'll be a global effort too. So look out for that. 1t.org next month, U.S. chapter launches. So it'll be an exciting way for you and others to engage in this global movement to plant a lot of trees.
Yeah, that's super cool. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're all just about wrapped up. Anything else you'd like to add? Any thoughts, insights that you want to mention?
No, just it's been great talking to you again. I love hearing about your projects, and I'm excited to figure out what I can learn more about your techniques and how to transfer them perhaps to some of our projects.
Yeah, for sure. I'm super excited to learn that you're working in Michigan. I think I mentioned that earlier,
Right.
just because it's something that's really close to my heart. And frankly, I'm not there now. I'm based in DC, but I had no idea that these initiatives were sort of happening in my former backyard. And I've definitely seen some of the red pines that you planted, so that's really cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Take care.
Yeah, it was great to talk to you. Take care.